Hey everybody, welcome to the Gootscast for April 14th, 2020. I'm here with John Trumbull. John, how are you today?
I'm doing okay, Ray. Thanks very much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for doing the show. Today, on Mondays we review wrestling, but on Tuesdays I like to talk to comedians and people that I know. How long have you been doing comedy, John?
I started, well, let's see. I did like one date early on, so I really count my start date from 2011. So it's going on 9 years now, but it's been kind of spotty. So
Okay. But yeah, you do it. I haven't seen you in a few years. I remember when I started doing Monday Night Gooch, you were on one of the first shows.
yeah,
And then I haven't seen you in a few. I think the last time I saw you were doing a panel with Anne. I'm going to say their name wrong, but she wrote for Daredevil.
and Nascenti, yeah.
Yes, okay. I used to call her Anne Nonichetti or something when I was a kid.
It can be
Uh,
tough to know how to pronounce the names when you only see them in print, you know?
yeah, like how do you say John Burns' name? Did I say it right just
Yep,
there?
it's said like burn.
Okay, I used to say it as a John Biner or something when I was a little
I
kid.
was I was the same way when I was a kid. He was John Brine for a while. Yeah, like
Yeah,
brine shrimp.
it's same thing when Mjolnir. Is that how you say it?
Thor's hammer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's like Mjolnir, something like that.
Something like that. When I was a kid, I called it Majomer or something. And I never forget I met because I really didn't talk to a lot of people in person about comic books. I would
Hmm.
just grab them and leave. And when I met like these kids who like were very social about their comic book, I said this is right before the Thor movie came out. I said Majomber. And like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, it's like hard. Some of these things, like, no one ever
Yeah,
says them out loud. So
I remember when like DC did their Who's Who guides in the 80s. They
mhm.
included a pronunciation guide at the beginning of the episode, at the beginning of the issues.
Yeah, I
So
think also same thing in the official handbook. Like they would
yeah.
have like a pronunciation next to the name. Because I used to be big into those as a kid. The
Yeah, and
official
I
handbook.
remember like I think Jim Shooter did that once in his bullpen bulletins comment column,
Mhm.
where he had a pronunciation guide for various artist names. Like, how are you going to say Bill Sienkiewicz? Uh,
Oh yeah. Oh wow. That's not how I thought it was said at all. You just taught me because I had it completely different. I thought it was Sisinowitz or some shit like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's difficult, and some of them have weird spellings.
Yeah, and back then none of them did podcasts or Twitter. Like you only really, I mean, but when I was growing up, you only really got to hear from them as people in Wizard magazine, and Wizard magazine at the time was too busy talking about how great Image was, so you really
Yeah.
never got interviews with some of the Marvel guys, the deep cut Marvel guys like Paul Ryan, who also did Phantom. He
Hmm.
did a great artwork on Fantastic Four, but if you just read Wizard and Hero Illustrated, you didn't even know that guy existed. So
Yeah, he's like he's had a solid career, but yeah, he never got like the big fan following that a lot of other comic artists can get. But
yeah, it's weird because I thought he was great. But, I mean, he had the era where Wonder Woman had the slit in her boobs, the really weird force slit. Remember that era, the '90s?
in her boobs or her boots?
Her boobs. Remember have you ever seen the '90s costume of her where she's basically naked
Um,
and Thing
I
had the
remember like
helmet?
sort of the biker shorts outfit that she had in the 90s.
Okay, yeah, but well, for the first couple of appearances, they gave her a boob window in the four, but so like
Oh,
it's like
Sue Storm. Okay, okay.
Sue
No, I was
Storm.
thinking I was thinking Wonder Woman for some reason. Did
Oh
you
no,
say
no,
Wonder
no, I'm
Woman?
sorry, Invisible Woman. Yeah, because he drew
Okay,
Fantastic. Yeah, she had a boob
okay.
window for like
Yes,
three
I'm with
issues.
you now. I'm
Yeah,
with you now.
but they still put a four there. So I'm just picturing like when she puts on this costume, she's got to put this like little like triangle in just such a weird position.
Honestly, whenever I saw that costume, I always think you must have really weird tan lines when you
Yeah,
wear that.
yeah.
The same thing with Aquaman when he got the harpoon hand and he had
Mm-hmm.
the sort of like the gladiator thing where it was the arm guard and it was covering one shoulder.
Yeah.
He must have gotten really funny tan lines.
It's funny because they were trying to make the characters gritty back then, but it comes across kind of charmingly goofy now. Whereas
Hmm.
now you have like Titans and Joker where they're saying "fuck this" and "fuck that," and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like kind of creepy, grim and gritty. I like the '90s version better, where they're just half naked with big guns. I don't like this.
Yeah, yeah. They try so hard to make these characters adult sometimes, and it gets pretty goofy in its own
Yeah,
way.
DC. Like, have you even tried to watch Titans?
No, actually, I was discussing the Titans show with a friend of mine earlier today, and I haven't seen it. And I watched the trailer of it, and when Robin said "fuck Batman," I was like, "That's it, I'm out."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it gets worse than that. It really
Yeah,
does.
that's what I've heard.
Starfire is a hooker. Here's the thing
Like
about the
literally a hooker.
she's I don't I have she's not in the second episode, but in the first episode she's literally like a hooker, and she burns somebody to death. And she goes, "Bird, motherfucker," or something, and I'm like,
Yeah, see,
really?
I just don't get the point of doing that. And a friend of mine on Facebook put it really well, and I'm forgetting exactly who that was, but it's somebody. I think it was Adam Troy Castro. He was like,
Mhm.
you know, if you want to do that sort of thing, create your own version of the
Yes.
characters where you can be edgy with them. But
Or create
if,
new characters.
yeah, exactly. But if it's like somebody that's on a kid's backpack, don't do that. Don't go there.
Yeah, I mean, even without the source material, if you let's just say there was no comic books, it was just the Titans Go cartoon. That
Right.
show is still so ridiculous to make when
Mhm.
Teen Titans Go has such a influence on kids nowadays. Like as
Yeah.
part of kids programming, it's still just insane to have a show where they're screaming "fuck Batman" and "suck my dick" and all this other. But like when you have all this rich source material to pull from the Titans comic,
Hmm.
and you have like basically I had never read the origin of Starfire, but I read it 2 years ago, and I was like, this is Frozen in space. This is like Frozen meets like Alien. Why would they not make this into a movie, like a kids movie? Like
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like it's basically the same storyline as Frozen, except imagine. Have you ever seen Frozen
I haven't seen Frozen, but I'm very familiar with Starfire's origin with
and Blackfire? But yeah,
yeah,
so like
sister.
It's basically the similar. They have a similar relationship, but Blackfire, just goes completely, sells Starfire into slavery and all that stuff. But it's a cool story because Starfire still loves her sister, even though the sister is just so completely insane.
Right.
And I'm like, why wouldn't you just make this movie? Why would you? You just have to take this one comic and make it into a movie. You'll probably have billions of dollars. Why would you dress her up like a hooker on a shitty CW style show? And I don't know.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, I think. Yeah, because like Mark Wolfman and George Paris, when they were doing the new Teen Titans, they gave those characters such rich and just
Mm-hmm.
dense backgrounds. Like they had
Yeah.
so much in them. Like they created Starfire and Raven and Cyborg, and they redeveloped Changeling quite a bit. And they did a lot of development work on Dick Grayson, Robin. He became Nightwing under their
Yeah.
tenure.
Mm-hmm.
So they really put a lot of work into these characters, and yeah, they've got so much going on, all of them.
Yeah, and they don't pull anything from it. And my other thing with DC comics, and are you more of a DC guy or Marvel guy?
Yeah, I've always been more of a DC guy. I mean,
Okay.
I had like a very silly anti-Marvel prejudice when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and like I was a kid in the 80s, in the early 80s. So the Marvel comics I was passing up like John Byrne's Fantastic Four,
Oh, you
Chris
you were
Claremont
past
was
the
still on
golden era.
X-Men, Roger Stern was writing Avengers, Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, Walt Simonson on Thor, the tail end of Frank Miller on Daredevil. I mean, all this incredible stuff that I could have been buying off the stands at the time, but I mean, I bought it later as back issues, of course,
Yeah.
when I wised up.
My thing with the DC characters, and this kind of there's something going on with Warner Brothers, the company in general. But my thing with the DC characters is that they're at the best. DC characters are very corny. Now, I don't mean
Mhm.
that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. They're
Right.
charmingly corny.
Yeah.
Even Joker is kind of corny. Even like Aquaman, he's corny, but that's what makes him work.
Hmm.
And when you Hawk and Dove, like for example, on the Teen Titans show, the actors for Hawk and Dove look amazing, and the costumes look incredible.
Right.
But
I've seen pictures.
yeah, but when you have like the Hawk character being like "fuck you, suck my dick," and Dawn being like "fuck me, Hawk," it's just like, what are you doing? Like this just looks so goofy and lovable and fun and
Hmm.
lighthearted. And you got these characters, and I don't know if you noticed, but Warner Brothers has done that with Hanna Barbera. They've done some crossovers
Yeah.
where they made Hanna-Barbera darker. Their Banana Splits movie. I don't know if you saw that horror movie they put out last year.
Saw the trailer. I mean, again, I look at that and I just think, well, who are you making this for? Because it's
Yeah.
like the people who are old enough to remember the Banana Splits, they're probably going to be offended.
Hmm.
And the people who are too young to remember the Banana Splits won't care. So
Yeah.
I heard that was developed as like there was another property, and I'm blanking on the name of the
Five
property.
Nights at Freddy's.
That's it. And they wanted to make a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, but I think they lost the rights to Five Nights at Freddy's, so they made it into the Banana Splits.
Yeah.
And now I don't know if that's 100% fact or if that's
I think I saw the movie and I think it's pretty true because the Banana Splits are robots in this
uh-huh.
movie and they weren't robots on the show.
Right.
And yeah, it's a pretty bad movie. It's like bad. It's like even if you don't give a shit about the Banana Splits, you just like horror, it's still pretty bad.
I mean, people have the right to reinterpret characters and all that, but when you do something that radical or that different from what their previously established brand is, I can't
Yeah.
help but wonder, well, what's the point?
Yeah, and I just feel like if you kind of, and I'm not saying like every book should be like a 60 Silver Age. I'm not every book. Every movie should be like a 60 Silver Age book. But
Hmm.
if you kind of keep the spirit of the characters and the spirit of like that the DC heroes are kind of good natured. Like
Yeah,
even when they're in a bad mood, they have a good nature about them. Like, did you see Aquaman?
I did see the Aquaman movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a little overstuffed. They packed a lot into that movie, man.
Yeah. I'll tell you when I got turned off by the movie is when Black Manta's father is drowning and Black Manta says, "Please save my father."
Right.
And if he had gotten off there, saved the dad, and the dad died in the hospital anyway,
Uh-huh.
I would have thought the movie was great. But when he said "let him die" or something like he built his own grave and he just keeps, I'm like Aquaman would never do that. A DC hero would never do that. He would get off the ladder and at least try to save the dad.
Hmm.
Especially
Hmm.
because Black Manta's begging him, "Please save my dad." And at that point, it's a son begging you to save his father, and you just keep walking up the ladder. And to me, it's like, well, that's not Aquaman.
Yeah, I mean I remember that moment in the movie, and I was thinking, yeah, well, yeah, that's not particularly heroic now, is
Yeah.
it? Yeah, I get that you're trying to make Aquaman a badass and steer away from the cliched, oh, he's the lame guy from Super Friends. Um, but you can do that and still make him a heroic character.
Yeah, heroic and compassionate and stuff.
And the DC characters, they have a sincerity about them that I think is wonderful, and a bit of a naive quality because a lot of them were created in the 40s.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, but I think you should preserve that. I don't think you should steer away from that. And it seems that the people running Warner Brothers, I think a lot of them, they seem to be very ashamed of the characters,
Or resentful of them.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or whatever it is. I don't.
Hmm.
But they seem to be like, oh well, we want to redefine, so like everybody's Batman, everybody's a badass, everybody's edgy,
Hmm.
and like, I mean, when they did the Man of Steel movie and it ends with Superman breaking the bad guy's neck, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's to save some people, but that's just so not what Superman is about, and that's
Yeah, and you save that moment for like Man of Steel 6. You don't do it there because if it happens, or like I don't know, Justice League Endgame. I'm just
Mhm.
like if they were successful when they got to that. Because if it happens there, if he's like, "Oh, I have no choice but to kill Thanos now," or Darkseid, whatever. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, but I have no choice now but to kill because you've raised the stakes so high. It's not gonna. It's gonna mean more. Whereas you just do it the first time he has that choice, it's like, well, you didn't even think about this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at it like with the DC movies, they wanted to get to where Marvel was
Hmm.
because like Avengers and all those movies were so successful and so popular, but they didn't really want to put the work in that Marvel and Kevin Feige did
Yeah.
to get there. They just wanted to get there as quickly as possible. And when you started out with a Superman movie where he breaks that guy's neck at the end, it just seems like you're building a house on a faulty foundation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, he's not really Superman. And even like when he shows up, his first line he says in Batman v Superman, this is when I checked out. First of all, I think that's the worst movie ever made. But
I
in
wouldn't fight you
Bat
too hard on that.
Yeah, I think you remember when I spent all of 2016 just ranting.
I walked out of that movie and I was like, I would rather see Joel Schumacher direct another
Yeah.
Batman movie than
Oh, I
Zack
would run
Snyder.
to the theater for another Joel Schumacher movie because at least
Joel
Batman was
Schumacher,
Batman.
he has his problems. That I'm not
Mhm.
going to argue that Batman and Robin is a good movie, but at
No.
least Joel Schumacher gets that superheroes are supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and also heroic as opposed, but
Yeah, yeah,
man, Batman v Superman, his first line is Lois goes to him, people could have got killed. He goes, I don't care. And I'm like, you're literally not Superman then. You're
yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, the whole and and when you look at how popular Chris Evans's Captain America was
hmm
with audiences, and he's sincere to the point of being corny.
yeah.
And but you see how people responded to that. I think if you did a Superman that had those more traditional qualities, I think people would respond to it in a big, big way. People always want heroes, you know?
Yeah. I think the problem with every Superman movie, and Superman Returns has its own issues, but I think the
Hmm.
problem with every Superman movie is, or every Superman script since Superman 4, is they're either trying to recreate Superman the movie, which I think was Superman Returns' big problem,
Yeah.
or they're trying to edge him up or call him corny or like take away what makes him Superman because they think it's kind of outdated and stupid. I think those are like the two problems that they keep
Yeah,
coming.
exactly. And those are, I mean, I remember a few months ago there was a debate about like how you make a Superman movie in today's age. And I
Well, you
went
don't do
on.
the origin again. You stay away from Jor-El just launching at rockets.
Well, I mean, most people know the basics of the
Yeah.
origin. So you
hmm
don't you probably don't need to do a whole movie that's half the movie's the origin.
Yeah.
Um, Neil Gaiman had he said like you don't make him contemporary, you make him inspiring.
Yeah.
And but I also think there's a lot that you could that's in Superman that you could use to make a modern day Superman movie. I mean, the fact that he's a journalist and that we're in the age of fake news where people are saying, "Oh, don't trust journalists," and all that. The
hmm
fact that he's an immigrant. I
Yeah.
mean, those are really topical things that you could use either of those or both of those as starter points for a great story.
And I mean, we literally have. I hate to say this because this is an insult to Luthor, but we literally have Lex Luthor as the president. Um, so you can draw from that too.
I, I think in some ways we have worse than Lex Luthor
Yes.
as president because Luthor he is an evil asshole, but he at least respects science.
And he gets the job done. Like I hated that crossover in 2001, Our World's at War, but he is willing to get when hey, Americans are gonna die. He's like
Mhm.
not on my watch. He's not like, well, it's the Chinese
Right?
fault or it's Dr. Felucci's fault or it's Dr. Minerva's fault. I don't know whose fault
Yeah.
in that
If
universe.
if Luthor was president in our real world, we would have all the ventilators we need.
Yeah.
Now, the ventilators would also like assemble into a death robot that would try to kill Superman, but we would have the ventilator.
Well, he would wait till everybody's saved. Then he'd be like, hey, I saved you. And the reason why you all had corona is because of Superman. So now I'm going to send this
Exactly,
robot to kill
exactly.
him. But yeah, like it's just sometimes, when I did my big Superman read through, I got up to the Luthor as president era. And I was like, if you handed in a script, what's like, imagine going back in time and telling like Dan Jurgens, hey, write this stuff for Luther to say, and it's like real Trump speeches,
Yeah.
and you had Dan Jurgens go to the editor and be like, this is what Luther is going to say this issue of Action Comics. The editor would be like, literally, no, this sounds like a no. This is Luther would never say this. No human being would ever say this.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
can't publish this, and it would probably blow their minds. Be like, not only does a human being say it, the president says it 20 years from now, and it's Trump.
And there's a really weird parallel too. Is when they revamped Luther in the 1980s and they made him like this corporate raider type.
Mhm.
One of the models of the character was Donald Trump because Donald Trump was he was a name then, and they did a special called um, the the biography of Lex Luthor or the autobiography of Lex Luthor. I'm
Yeah, I
forgetting
remember. I always wanted to read that. It had a great cover, and it was based off the cover of the Trump's book. Yes.
exactly.
Mhm.
It's the cover is a painting of Lex Luthor, and it's more or less the cover of Art of the Deal. It uses like the same font and typeface and everything.
Yeah, and I remember that book. I think they had Luther kill people as a kid and stuff to make him like, oh, this
Mhm.
guy's really evil.
Yeah,
But
you find out he has a backstory. He took out an insurance policy on his parents and then arranged their deaths in a car accident.
Yeah, and it's so funny because even after all the work they've done to make him look evil, and I think he get Perry White's son killed too when in early post crisis, and
Yeah,
that was really his son.
yeah, yeah. We had like Perry White, the editor of the Daily Planet, had a troubled son by the name of Jerry White, and it
Hmm.
eventually came out that he was Lex Luthor's son because Perry's wife Alice had an affair with Lex Luthor while Perry was overseas covering. At the time, it was the Vietnam War. Now it would
Yeah,
be some other war, but
yeah, and even after all that work they did to make him evil, he'd still be a better president than Trump and not have cost as many American lives.
I know, because every once in a while they do a story where they show like Lex Luthor cares for his sister, or he has some redeeming qualities. And
Yeah. Yeah, I just because I think Lex Luthor knows that if you show compassion for like the public, at least you're gonna get whatever you want, including like to tell people, "Hey, Superman's an asshole." You're gonna get that.
Mhm.
If Luthor acted like Trump did, but you know what? It works. It's working because there's people out there that swear by Trump, so you can't really.
it
Luther would be like, "How is this working? This guy isn't a
Yeah,
scientific genius."
I know. We're living through such strange times, man.
Yeah. Now, how are you with the? Are you still working with this virus? Are you home quarantined?
I am home quarantined right now. I was actually like looking for work before this all started. So this, threw an extra monkey wrench into the job search.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Um, so I was looking for a new day job. So yeah, it's difficult, but I'm taking it day by day and just looking for jobs that I can reasonably do without risking my life.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Are you getting have you decided to get? Are you eligible for unemployment? Or?
I was getting unemployment before, but it had actually run out for me before
Oh,
this started. So
that sucks. Yeah.
it it sucks, but this too shall pass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. How are you doing with everything?
Oh, I'm good. I'm actually really. This actually came at a good time because like I kind of wanted to catch up on a lot of things and work on some new projects and just like relax. I used to feel if I wasn't out doing stand up on a Friday and I was sitting on my ass watching TV, I'd feel very guilty.
Hmm.
And now I don't. I'm like, because now I do a wrestling podcast after SmackDown ends. I'm like, well, this is work. I'm doing work. When I watch wrestling, it's work now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't feel guilty sitting around, and I think it's very freeing. And once everything goes back to normal, if that ever happens, but
Hmm.
when it does, there's not going to be, well, hopefully, if everything goes right, we're not going to have another opportunity like this again to kind of, just sit around guilt free. And so I'm enjoying it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think whatever you can do. I think it's really good to have a creative outlet of some kind.
yeah,
So
that's why I'm doing this. Yeah.
yeah, stepping up in the podcasting. Like I've got a podcast. I do a podcast with my friend Darren Patterson, who's also a comic. We do a podcast called the SNL Nerds,
Hmm.
where we talk about Saturday Night Live. Now, of course, since the show went on hiatus, we
Yeah.
we've had to scramble a little more or a little sooner than we were expecting to. But there's a ton of movies starring people from SNL. So
Oh yeah,
that's
you can
not-
you can always just you can coast on that. I mean, you can even do shows that were produced by Lord Michaels too, like the Mulaney show and stuff.
exactly. Yeah, we could
Mhm.
we could even do that. We did last summer during the hiatus. We talked about the Animal House television series, that
Oh
Delta
wow.
House, that lasted like 13 episodes, something like that. And it's not very good, but it starred as a young Michelle Pfeiffer. So
That's wild. I forgot they did that.
yeah,
What
most
did you
people
think of
did.
this week's episode?
The SNL at home,
Mhm.
it was interesting. It was we actually just dropped our episode about it yesterday, late Monday,
Mhm.
and we were kind of mixed on it. We kind of appreciated the attempt, but they were working under a lot of limitations because like
Yeah.
all the cast is quarantined or self-isolating, and they're doing all this stuff over Zoom. They're basically doing what we're doing
Yeah. Yeah.
right now, which is kind of funny. It's like it's weird to see professional broadcasters suddenly on this level of
Well, they look Colin Jost looked like he was in a hostage situation, I thought. Michael Che looked very comfortable. Michael Che had a great sound system, but
Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't tell Colin Jost, unless it was live, to be like, hey, get out of a room with an echo, because his room had a big echo. It was hard to hear him in some spots.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like I'm watching Stephen Colbert's show, and he's got like a professional looking setup. He's got like a high def camera. He's got good
Mhm.
sound quality, and you see some of the others, and they don't have as good of a setup. But it's just, I guess everybody just has to deal with what they had at the moment.
Yeah. I
Um,
I'm sorry, finish your thought. I'm sorry about that.
no, no, go ahead. I was just
I was
wondering.
saying to somebody, because, like, I watch a good number of YouTubers, like video game YouTubers and comic book
Hmm.
YouTubers, and these are guys that are basically in their house, and they look like they're on professional sets. And I said to some comedians, they blew me off, and I'm like, if SNL is going to have to keep doing this, they should hire, not to write sketches, but they should hire some of these YouTubers to produce, and to say, hey, Colin Jost, this is the
Hmm.
equipment you need. What's your idea? Colin Jost gives him the idea. He films it at his house. He Dropboxes it to the YouTuber, and the YouTuber cleans it up, makes it look good. I said, because some of the comments are like, well, they're SNL. Colin Jost doesn't need a YouTuber's help. But I'm like, he basically does, because he's a YouTuber now. Like, that's what these guys are.
Yeah,
And if, yeah, these guys know how to do this by themselves. I'm not saying that, like, the YouTuber writes out Weekend Update, but the YouTuber should, they should have YouTubers Zoom, like, having meetings with the staff and be like, this is what you need to do to make this look really good. Because if they really nail it, if they can make their home sketches look and sound just good as a set, they might not even need to go back in the studio until next year. They can probably do this all summer.
there's going to be some network executive who's like, well, if we can do these shows this cheaply with everybody at home.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, why not hire some YouTubers as consultants? I mean, like, why not at this point? Like, everyone's become a YouTuber now. That's what these guys are.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but I thought it was an interesting experiment. I hope they do a few more. I'm interested to see if they work out the kinks. It is also funny to see somebody like Larry David have to record off his phone, and you can tell that he has no idea what he's
Yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah.
You
And
know?
it was interesting to see them just sort of vamp because they don't have access to like the makeup or the wigs
Hmm.
or the costuming that they have. So you're just seeing them improvise basically, and it was really interesting to see that. I
Yeah, it
wouldn't mind
was.
them attempting a few more SNL at home episodes.
No, me neither. But I do. Like I said, if I was on this, and I know probably, I bet you Lorne Michaels doesn't even know about these video game YouTubers or anything. But if I'm on that production cast, I'd be like, we should look up some of these guys and have them, and let's just at least have a phone meeting with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, how can you make SNL look better or sound better and stuff. So yeah, so that's a podcast. You can get that on iTunes and everything.
Yeah, we're on like every major platform. We're on iTunes, Apple Podcasts,
Mhm.
Audacity, I believe. I mean, like I listen to all my podcasts on Apple, so I'm not sure what all the other ones are. But
Are you
yeah,
on Spotify still?
yes, we're on
Yeah.
Spotify. You just look up SNL Nerds, and you'll see a nice little logo with my head and Darren's head, and on there. And we just basically do what you and I are doing now. We just talk about. We go through it sketch by sketch. We talk about what we liked, what we didn't like. When we're covering a movie or something, we talk about that, and we go on interesting tangents along the way.
Yeah, that's what I like about my Disney podcast, because everyone goes, "Oh, Disney movies are all princesses," but no, every Disney film is different. And like when we do our Tarzan episode, spoiler alert, he's going to be a Tarzan guest. There's a lot of tangents to go on what the original book was like, what the original
Hmm.
movies were like. Phil Collins. There's a lot of things you can pull from each movie.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also interesting with the Disney movies, I'm sure, just to see, like, because I mean, there's a certain formula to them, but it's
Yeah, and the evolution of that formula. Yeah,
yeah, and it's fun to see the evolution of the formula and the variations that they introduce to keep it fresh.
yeah, yeah. No, 110%. So that's always fun to, like, certain movies you'll go on crazy tangents and stuff.
Hmm.
So let's talk about the main topic. Every episode I like to talk about a different industry that's been affected by Corona. And right now I want to talk to you about the comic book industry, because it's pretty crippled. And if they don't find a solution soon, I don't know what's going to happen. They're in a really weird spot right now. Do you know most of what's going on?
Well, I mean, comics are in this weird, vulnerable state. I think largely because Diamond, the main distributor,
Hmm.
Diamond basically still has a monopoly on the business,
Yeah.
and they have for like well over 20 years.
I would say about 25 years. I remember there was another distributor that Marvel bought in the 90s. Do you remember that
Heroes
other
World, yeah.
Heroes World? Yes, I used to get both catalogs. And
Hmm.
when Marvel started, I remember they took Marvel out of previews. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
And after Marvel kind of closed up their distribution, they went back to Diamond. And ever since then, Diamond's basically controlled the comic book industry.
Yeah, yeah, they have what is, for all intents and purposes, a monopoly on comic book distribution, and it's a shame because I mean, if one goes down like this, they take down a lot of the industry with them.
Yeah.
Like I write for a magazine called Back Issue from Tomorrow's Publishing. They're the same folks who do the Jack Kirby Collector, and Diamond does their distribution. So they're not getting to comic shops right now. They have issues that are ready to go and aren't getting
Nobody
out
can
there,
get them.
and the bookstores aren't taking them. So they got a vamp.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
they yeah, well, here's the weird thing with the comic industry, I think, is that, they could put the books out on digital. They could.
mhm.
But there's been no books in America or worldwide, I think, since this is the third week. We're entering the third week tomorrow. And they're not doing that to kind of save the stores, to kind of save the industry,
Right.
because I think, the fear is if you go to all digital, um, people will just do that and they won't go back to the stores.
Yeah, they're not necessarily motivated to go get a physical copy at the store and go support the stores. It's digital is very convenient.
Yeah, and
Like,
I went to digital after New 52. I kind of New 52. I cut off DC, and
mhm.
we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I went to digital after that, and I've never looked back. And to be honest, I've read more comic books because of digital, because no spacing issues. Okay, I'll just get another hard drive. Like,
Sure.
who cares? Like, but I've read more comic books since then. But I get why they're doing it, but at the same time, how long can you not put out new comics for the sake of these stores? Because the
Mhm.
longer they wait, the more people will be like, well, you know what, I kind of like it, because comic books now are expensive.
Yes.
That's the other reason why I kind of stopped. I was literally like, my pull list, I used to spend like, I used to buy a lot of books. Towards 2009, 2010, I was spending like $50 a week. Then around 2011, it became like almost $80 a week. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah, it adds up, man.
Yeah, it adds up. And I'm like, I don't even like what they're about to do with New 52. Why am I doing this?
Right,
And
right.
I pulled out. But like, I think, and I don't think I'd ever go back to spending $80 on physical books. I know I don't have any room anymore. But, the longer you wait, the more people might be like, I kind of like having this extra $80 a week, and I don't really miss the books that much.
Hmm.
What do you think? Do you think the longer they wait, the more they're in trouble, or?
Yeah, probably as a general statement. My basic feeling is though that I mean the comics industry has survived a lot over the years. I mean they've
Yeah.
survived congressional hearings in the 50s.
Hmm.
They've survived the comics code. They survived the implosion in the late 70s when the huge New York blizzard affected the distribution.
Yeah. And
New
that they canceled all those DC books all at
Right.
once.
I
Yeah.
mean, they've survived recessions. They've survived like all this stuff, and comics are still here in one form or another. I think comics are going to have to change by necessity.
Hmm.
I don't know what form that change will
Yeah,
take.
I don't mind to, I think it's gonna have to be, and it's gonna suck for these stores, but I think eventually it's gonna have to go to all digital. I think that's the future.
I mean, it could be. It could be. I mean, because people in general don't consume physical media like they used to.
Yeah.
People don't buy like DVDs or Blu-rays like they used to. I mean, I still do wherever I
I
can.
still do. I'm a lunatic with that.
Yeah, I mean, partly it's because like I'm an older guy. I'm like 47,
Mhm.
so a little set in my ways. But also, it's with digital stuff. You never know when this stuff is just going to go away spontaneously.
Oh yeah, your hard drive could die out, and then next
Your
thing you know,
hard
like,
drive could die, or even just like, oh, I can watch that on Netflix, but it might disappear from Netflix next month, so you don't
yeah.
really own anything.
Hmm.
But if I own say Captain America: The Winter Soldier on Blu-ray, and as long as I have a working Blu-ray player, I can watch that movie whenever I want,
Yeah, exactly.
and nobody can really take that away from me unless they break into my apartment and physically take it from me.
That's next. That'll be what'll happen after Corona. Because they're just gonna take our
That'll be
DVDs
what
from us.
happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When the corporations have the ultimate power, they will be legally justified in doing
You got to stay till the end of the end credits because there's a little disclaimer. Hey, listen, the world turns to shit. We're just gonna take these DVDs from you.
We are legally allowed to break into your apartment and steal
Yeah.
your stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not even your thing. No, we're still taking it.
Yeah, no, Todd McFarlane had a great interview where he's like, you have to consider most comic book fans as addicts, and an addict, if you stop handing an addict crack cocaine, they're eventually going to be like, well, I don't need crack cocaine, and they're not going to go back. But like, you wean people off the comic books, they're not going to collect anymore. And I think it's true, and I think it's noble that they're trying to keep the comic book stores open. But like, I just feel like if this is still going in June, I mean, if I was Marvel DC, I'd say to the stores, look, I'm sorry, and we'll try to do something for you when this goes away. But it doesn't look like it's going away. It doesn't look like brick and mortar. We got to get these books out to people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's inevitable that at least some comic shops will sadly be closing their doors because of this, and I don't know how you can prevent that. I don't know how you. So I think, yeah, there's definitely going to be a change. Gail Simone, a few weeks ago on Twitter, she had a wonderful idea. She just like, we should do a big event, get people back in the store, and let's do like a Marvel DC crossover thing again.
Oh yeah.
And and a big event like that, and that's like the industry coming together, and that would get people excited because we haven't had the Marvel DC crossover in a big way since like 2003 when they did the JLA Avengers.
Yeah, no, that was, what would get me in the store? I don't even like this character anymore, but what would get me back in the store?
What's that?
Spawn Spider-Man, drawn by Todd McFarlane and written by Dave Michelli, and they resolve that fucking Spawn. They resolve whatever storyline they have going in Spawn. Spider-Man teaches him how to be a hero, and he changes permanently. I would buy that book. I don't know if he'd ever do it, but I would buy that book. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't care about Spawn now.
But I don't know if McFarlane would do that or not. But yeah, I mean, something like that would get people talking. That would get them excited. That would get them intrigued. And I could only see that as a good thing for the
industry. Yeah, I think, I don't know if you heard the story, but this is what a dick McFarlane is. But when 9/11 happened, Joe Quesada reached out to him and said, hey, you can write and draw your Spider-Man crossover. You can do whatever storyline you want. And I want to give all the proceeds to the victims of 9/11. And McFarlane was like, nope. And Quesada was like, okay, cool.
I hadn't heard that before. No.
Yeah, that was in Wizard around. I read that in Wizard, and I was like, why would you not go back and do a Spider-Man? Everyone loved him on Spider-Man. I mean, now it would be like really, it would still be huge at this point if he went back into Spider-Man. But yeah, a DC Marvel crossover would be huge. X-Men or like something that has long-term effects on both universes. I think that'd be great.
Or just do a bunch of specials. Just smaller things. It doesn't have to be like a huge scale thing. Like do another Batman Daredevil thing. And you could find some really cool crossovers. I'd love to read like a Wonder Woman Thor crossover, the Greek gods and the Norse gods.
Yeah. Or Harley Quinn, Deadpool, that would sell. I mean, I wouldn't like it.
Exactly. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. Those are both very popular characters. They probably mesh pretty well. And they got really creative the last time they did a big thing in the 90s where they did the DC versus Marvel.
And
they did the amalgam books where they just they mushed up their characters together, that was just fun.
That was huge. I love that.
Some of the books were great. Some of them were not so great. Some of them were outright insane, but all of them were interesting.
Remember Magneto and the Metal Man? That was great.
Yeah. I mean, I really liked. They did Iron Lantern, which was a mashup of Iron Man.
That was good.
And they had Batman and Wolverine merged together as Dark Claw. They merged together Superman and Captain America as Super Soldier. Yes,
that was good. Yes, that was. Oh, I didn't like Superboy and Spider-Man. I thought like, you can find someone better to mesh up with Spider-Man. I always thought.
Yeah. I mean, but it's just a one shot, so
yeah.
Whatever. They had fun with it. I mean, I really like they had a Spider-Boy thing where he met like the equivalent of the Legion of Superheroes, and the joke was like they were getting rebooted every
Oh
few
yes, I
pages.
remember that. I like the Punisher. I think it was Steve Trevor was Punisher, and the Wonder Woman Bullets and Bracelets. I think they called it, which is a cool title for a Punisher Wonder Woman team up.
Sure, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
They did. They had Bruce Wayne, Agent of Shield.
that was good.
Oh gosh, I mean, they did a couple runs of amalgam books, so I'm forgetting some. They did Lobo the Duck, which I didn't
That
read
was
that one,
good.
but
Swamp Man thing. I think that was an actual thing.
yeah, yeah, and they had some that were just basically gags.
Yeah,
Um, but like that, like I remember the Iron Lantern book ended with a mashup between the Mandarin and Sinestro, and he was Mandarinestro.
that was. But the Iron Lantern was a great looking costume.
It really was.
Yeah,
That was a really good looking costume. That's one of my favorite of the amalgam books.
yeah, that was. I remember that being like this stands out because they've never really done it. They've never even done before since a green Iron Man outfit. So armor. I mean, so it was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool. It was really cool looking. I mean, I'd be down for it, but now with these corporations being so weird, who knows if they would want
Yeah,
to.
and I mean, who knows with Disney owning Marvel now, and DC is still owned by Warner's, and yeah, there'd be a lot of corporate hoops to jump through, but oh man, it would be fun.
Yeah, and AT&T, I get the sense more and more that AT&T sees the DC characters as like IPs that they can monopolize, and if something doesn't make them a lot of money, they'll just cut it. Like I don't think they have any love for these characters.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
mhm.
I mean, that's if they really want to uh, merchandise these characters or use them to their fullest extent, they need like a Kevin Feige. They need a
Yeah,
guy who has a love and a passion for these characters, who can be
but
like who knows what makes all these characters cool and knows how to bring that out in
mhm.
a modern way, in a way that speaks to modern audiences.
Yeah, true. Because I feel like I do feel like Dan Dito and Jeff Johns had a love for these characters, but I don't think Jeff Johns, once he leaves the comic book page, I don't know if his intuition really translates.
Hmm.
Every movie he's kind of had every movie or TV show he's kind of had a heavy hand in, except for like the 2 episodes of Smallville he did, which were good. Like they were good, but everything else he's kind of like he's been involved in hasn't really been good on screen. Or
It's
Dan
been a mixed
Dito,
bag. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think he's heavily involved in this Titan show. It makes no sense to me how he could be approving anyway. But that neither here nor there. But yeah, I feel like they have love for the characters, but they don't have the savvy that Kevin Feige does.
Right.
I don't think they get like you can change things, but you got to keep the spirit of the character.
Yes. Yeah. I always think it's you got to preserve the spirit of the character, not necessarily the trivia of the character. Like if you're doing a Spider-Man movie, it's okay that his first girlfriend isn't Betty Brant at the
Yes.
Daily Bugle.
Hmm.
And I say this as a person who loves Betty Brant. She is my personal favorite of
Yeah.
Spider-Man's girlfriends. But Mary Jane Watson is the best known and most popular. So it makes sense to do her in if you're doing a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the comic. I mean, whenever I see some other fan be like, "Oh, well, they can't possibly do that until they do this and this and this and
Mhm.
this," and it's like, well, no, they don't have to tell the exact same stories as the comics in the exact same order as the comics.
Yeah. You just have to get the character beats right. Like, if you're going to tell me, like, hey, we're going to do a 3-movie Spider Man arc, but at the end, he's going to wind up with Felicia Hardy. As
Hmm.
long as Mary Jane, Felicia Hardy, and Spider Man are essentially at their heart the characters that we love, it's
Right.
fine if Spider Man says to Mary Jane, I don't have feelings for you, actually. I'm really into Felicia. It's fine. Like that doesn't happen in the book, but it's fine as long as the characters are the characters. Or, if Spider Man doesn't work at a Daily Bugle, he works instead at a coffee shop, well, that's what Ben Riley did. That's fine as long as it's the heart of the character, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, they have liberties. He's got like the Iron Man armor
Hmm.
spider suit thing, which it leans maybe a little too far into the gizmo heavy thing, but the heart of Spider-Man is right. I mean,
Yeah.
he's still like the young guy who struggles and but he's doing his best and he's trying to be responsible and that's the heart of Spider-Man, and they get that right. So I
And
can't get too worked up over the more trivial stuff.
and that's my problem with DC. It's like, like when I first saw Joker, I liked it, but the more I watch Joker, I'm like, this is not a movie about the Joker. This is a guy dressed up like the Joker.
Hmm.
But this is not anything what the Joker is about, what he stands for, what made us fall in love with him. This is basically like, hey, great job, Joaquin Phoenix. You know?
Yeah, it was a great acting job. I mean, as a movie, it's like, well, I've seen Taxi Driver and I've seen The King of Comedy, so
Yeah, you just mash them both up.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and that's my thing when you watch these movies. Like, it's like, all right, you made a good movie and it's called the Joker, but that's not really the Joker. You didn't really like, without him as a response to Batman, it's kind of just like hollow to me.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
exactly, exactly. I mean, I find the Joker interesting mainly in relation to Batman.
Yes,
As a
yeah,
solo thing, yeah, not so much.
yeah, and also because like I always feel like the Joker is escalation. Like, when Batman shows up, and they did this
Hmm.
really well in Batman Begins and Dark Knight. When
Right.
Batman shows up, it's just mobsters, and then all of a sudden the Joker shows up, and it's like, well, you've shown up in a bat suit. You're dressed like a fucking bat. What do you think's gonna happen? Now a villain's gonna
Mhm.
show up dressed like a clown.
Yeah, they up the ante, and
They
yeah,
upped
suddenly
the ante, and
you
that's
have
why I
Superman.
always felt Dark Knight Rises lost me because, and I know maybe you would disagree with me and say that's not in the world, not really with the world's rules, but I always thought the third movie in the Dark Knight trilogy, the villain should have had some type of powers,
Mm,
because you dressing up like Batman, you beat the mob, cool, you beat Joker. Now we got guys with freeze guns. Now Superman's out there, the Flash is out there because
mhm.
you made this a crazy world. The world's gonna get crazy. Can you deal with it, Bruce?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is something that they haven't really done in a big way in the Batman movies. I have some problem. The Chris Nolan Batman movies. I think they're wonderfully made movies. Well, at
Mhm.
least the first two are.
Yes.
Um, but I do have some problems with them because I think Nolan went so naturalistic with Batman. I think he lost some of the pulp stuff that makes Batman really cool.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, and I think he would have got it in the third movie, because I think if Heath, and I may be wrong here, but I think if Heath Slater did Heath Ledger, I always call that's a
Mhm.
wrestler's name, Heath Ledger. Sorry, if he didn't die, I think the third movie, because I think a good storyline for those movies is by the end of the third movie, he's in a comic book. This guy's in a
Mhm.
comic book, and
Mhm.
the Joker was kind of the introduction to that. But
Yeah.
I think when he died, they really didn't know where to go, and they kind of just said, "Well, we'll just have him retire." And I think they took Dark Knight Rises and kind of meshed up with Nightfall and No Man's
Yeah.
Land,
Yeah. Um,
and
that movie's trying to do so much, that third one.
yeah, so much
Um,
with so little. Yeah.
but yeah, Heath Ledger's death, I think, really did throw a really unfortunate monkey wrench at
Hmm.
them. I mean, because I don't see how the Joker couldn't have played a larger part in that third movie if Heath Ledger had
Yeah.
still been alive and well when they were making it. Uh,
Yeah, it would have been interesting. Like, Bane gets him. I always thought if they're gonna stick with that script, Bane gets him out of prison and is like, "Come work with me," and then the Joker just leads a whole faction of Gothamites. It's just insanity. And finally, Bane, when Batman breaks out of that prison, Bane goes to Batman, "I need your help. I don't know how you dealt with this fucking guy." But I don't even know what he's. And then it's a three-way battle, like Joker, Bane, and Batman over
sure,
who's gonna
sure.
take back Gotham. Um, Although I don't think it would. I think it would have been a completely different movie if he lived. I don't think that was gonna be the
Oh,
movie.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think they kind of had to vamp. They had to write around. Suddenly, we had this huge character who's no longer there.
Yeah, I don't think Catwoman, but it would have been in the movie. I think it would have been very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows what they would have done? I don't think they probably had a real developed story
Hmm.
when that happened because, like, Ledger died. Did he die even before the release of that movie? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, they think they already had it pretty much done, and he
Yeah,
died. He died like when they were like ramping up the promotion for the movie. Like the trailers were out, and
right,
they
right.
had
Yeah,
the date set. But yeah, I think he died in
yeah.
like January or February of
Yeah,
2008.
just such a shame. I mean, because he was such a talented guy.
I also think the DC universe, because I think they would have gave him whatever he wanted to keep him around. He kind of would have been like the Robert Downey Jr. of the DC movies. I
Mhm.
think the DC movies would have been in a better place if he had not died.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you were wanting to like build a series of DC movies, I don't think you would start with a movie like the Chris Nolan movies. I see what you're saying about like the
Mhm.
upping the ante until you're ultimately in a comic book world, but I think it would make more sense to start with a more comic booky type
Yeah,
character
but
like
I think
Superman
like
or Wonder Woman.
if they tried to like um if they tried to reboot the universe, we're gonna make it more like the MCU, and they didn't cast him as the Joker, and he was still around out there,
Yeah,
people would have been like livid. Even if he had said, "I don't want to be in the movie," like even if he had said, "You know what?" Because I think he also would have been like, after 2 or 3 of those Joker appearances, he would have been like, "I'm going to make Oscar." I think he would have been
sure. Yeah,
like
yeah.
DiCaprio or something, making Oscar-winning films and stuff. Like,
Right, right. Yeah,
yeah.
and you don't necessarily want to do that forever. I mean, it's so exceptional that that Marvel, they got so many A-list actors, or they made them into A-list actors,
Hmm.
and they hung on to them for a half dozen movies or more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
It was
like
very impressive.
they're all cast well, and everybody in the cast seems to get along. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
They get tattoos.
it's just incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
they all seem to genuinely like each other. They have a genuine chemistry together. Everyone's right for their part. I mean, it's unbelievable how well they pulled all that off.
Well, I also think like they all learned some pretty wise lessons from Ed Norton, and what's the guy he was in, Terrence Howard. I think they learned
Uh-huh.
lessons because those guys kind of like tried to like pull rank on the studio, and the
Mhm.
studio just like, see you later, and the movies didn't miss a beat. So I think they're like, all right, maybe like, we have a good thing going. Why are we gonna tip the apple cart? They know what they're doing with these movies. We'll just show up and collect our paychecks. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
because Terrence Howard tried to make demands, and they were like, you know what? Have fun. See you next time.
Yeah, yeah, and I really liked Terrence Howard in the first Iron Man movie. I liked Edward Norton in the Hulk movie. I think the Hulk
Yeah.
movie is a very underrated movie. Um, and I kind of want to look in on the parallel universe where Edward Norton stayed playing the Hulk. That would have been interesting. I like Mark Ruffalo in the role too, though.
No,
But
no, I like him a lot, and he
yeah,
kind of really reminds me. I think the best Bruce Banner is David. I'm sorry, Bill Bixby.
yeah, yeah. David
And I
Bowie.
would have loved to have seen, if they were able to in the '80s make a big budget Avengers movie back then and have him reprise
Oh yeah.
Hulk, but with giving him the lines like, I'm always angry
Hmm.
in that movie. I would have loved to see Bill Bixby like really sink his teeth into, because I think if you gave him some of these scripts, Avengers and Ragnarok and stuff, Bill Bixby would have really went to town.
It's funny you bring that up because like a few years ago, I started writing or like a sort of an alternate universe thing where instead of doing Superman 3, they instead had Christopher Reeve as Superman, and then they brought in the other Justice League characters. They brought in Linda Carter as Wonder Woman. They brought in
Mm-hmm.
and then I started thinking about like, okay, around circa 1983, who would you get as Batman? And then I was like, Kevin Conroy was in his 20s about then, and he probably could have pulled it off. I have
Mm-hmm.
no idea if he would have been genuinely interested in the part back then, but and I started just imagining like if they'd done a Justice League movie in 1983 with Christopher Reeve and Linda Carter and Kevin Conroy, and I started trying to figure out like who other actors might be
Mm-hmm.
to play other Justice Leaguers, and yeah, it was fun to imagine.
Uh, no, I was about to be like Patrick Duffy because he played the man from Atlantis. He could be Aquaman.
There you
Jr.
go.
But
There's your Aquaman.
the Larry Hagman as Lex Luthor. There you go. In '83. What was it? Shoot, I wanted to bring up something to you about the '80s, and shoot, I want to. And you brought up. Man, what was the point I wanted to
I
bring up to you?
sidetracked you.
Yeah, yeah, I had a point I wanted to bring. You mentioned something.
You were
Uh,
talking about Bill Bixby as David Banner.
Bill Bit, yeah, but there was something about like the '80s. Well, I don't know. You know what though? I can't. It's so funny because I'm sure now like some of these older filmmakers, but they see the success of Marvel, they could go back to the '80s and get that Spider-Man movie approved. They
Hmm.
they they would have probably like fought tooth and nail. But it's so funny like how all these years they left so much money on the table. That's kind of why I hated Batman v Superman, because realistically speaking, you probably could have done that movie any time after 1940, and it probably would have been like an amazing film. Even if it wasn't that good, it would have been an amazing film. And
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
fact that it took this long, and you already have Winter Soldier and Avengers and Spider-Man and Dark Knight, and Batman Begins behind you, and you came up with this tone deaf piece of shit. Just really got me. Like, You know?
And you know, I mean, what drives me nuts is like Henry Cavill, if he had the right script and director, he would be a wonderful Superman. I mean,
Yeah.
he's kind of stuck playing a character who, in my opinion, not very much like Superman. I really like what Ben Affleck did in that movie. I didn't think the script or the direction was very good, but I
But
thought
he
Ben
was good,
Affleck
yeah.
gave a good performance. And
Hmm.
Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, she's terrific.
Yeah.
I mean, so
And
they could have done it with the right material, but the stars just didn't align for them, and it breaks my heart because I am more of a DC guy, and I think all the time I'm just like, if you had told 12-year-old me someday there's going to be a live action Justice League movie,
mhm.
it would have blown my mind. And then if you then told that 12-year-old kid there will be a Justice League movie and you will not be terribly interested in seeing it, he would not have understood that.
Yeah. Oh, if you had told me that man ape was gonna have a better on-screen representation than Aquaman, like I would have been
Right.
like, well, "What are you?" They nailed man ape and Rocket Raccoon, and they couldn't nail they couldn't nail Flash. At least the
Right.
movie version of Flash. I just thought that I think the movie version of Flash is horrendous.
I really didn't like the suit that they did. I
Oh,
mean, because it's, you know, it's this big, bulky, overly complicated thing, and I'm like, no, he's a runner. He should look fast and sleek and
and
light
how
on
could
his
a
feet.
kid create that? He's supposed to be like a homeless kid in the movie. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's in the movies. I mean, you give them a certain amount of artistic license because they always the suits always look like something a movie company
mhm.
spent thousands of dollars on. But
Yeah, but that suit, ooh, and just the way they have him act. And the one thing that redeemed him was the fact that he showed up in the Crisis crossover.
that was fun.
That was
I mean, that
fun.
was just fun.
And that kind of makes me forgive the movies because I'm like, all right, so if the Snyderverse, Earth Snyder, which is what I'm, if Earth Snyder is just another Earth
Right.
connected to the CW Earth, then the movies aren't that offensive because it's not the main Earth. But you know, like then it's kind of like it kind of made me forgive the movies. So
Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I try not to get too worked up over it. If it's like
yeah,
if it's not a version that I like, and it's so like, well, you know, maybe the next one will be better.
yeah, because
You know,
there's always going to be a next one.
yeah, yeah, and they reboot things a lot faster these days. It used to be that if you did a bad version of Superman, that was it for the next 20 years.
Yeah,
Now it's like five,
yeah. Well,
maybe.
yeah, in 5 years we'll have J.J. Abrams fucking up Superman, so that'll be nice. You know. Hey, when did do you collect comic books regularly still, or you're just once in a blue moon guy?
I don't get as many new comics as I used to. I tend to buy back issues much more. But I mean, and but the older I get, the pickier I get. So it's like I want the characters I like, but I want them done by creators I like. So I follow creators a little more than characters now. Like a few
I think
weeks ago,
that's smart.
I picked up there was a Silver Surfer special that was written by Alan Brennert and drawn by Jerry Ordway,
Hmm.
um, which I loved. It was this great story where he's at the Palisades Park in New Jersey, and it was back in the 40s, right after the war,
Hmm.
and it was just a great story. Like Alan Brennert's a really good writer, and Jerry Ordway's just a wonderful artist, and I love the hell out of that book. So that was really fun. But there aren't really any books that I'm buying month to month right now.
Yeah. What made you stop collecting? What was the turning point? And I'll give you I'll first of all I'll give you the cliff notes and I'll give you a more detailed version. My
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
my jump off was New 52. I was like I have invested at that point 20 years into buying these fucking books.
Yeah.
I was very happy. I was very happy with the DC universe in 2010. I didn't think it needed any changes. I really liked where they were going with all the stories. I liked all the teams. There was some stuff I was like, meh, but I liked everything. And to change it that hard and that like kind of tone deaf, because it was kind of like a return to like image 90s when DC was never like that. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I'm done. There were some other things which we'll get into, but that was the main thing. What was like the big thing for you?
Um, the New 52 didn't help for me, but the New 52 for me, because I'd been reading since like late 70s, early 80s. So
Hmm.
I'd seen all these reboots before with DC in particular. Like you had the Crisis on Infinite Earths, you had like Zero Hour, you had um, Flashpoint and the New 52, and with each reboot, you get a little more removed as a reader.
Yeah.
You care a little less. You become very conscious of the artifice of it. And it's very distancing when you're following these characters, you care about these characters, and then suddenly it's like, oh, that aspect of the character you like, that's no longer relevant.
Or that supporting character doesn't even exist anymore.
Right, yeah. Right. I mean, like, you know, Superman was married, now he's not, or he wasn't married and now he is. And after a certain point, you're just like, well, it's just going to be rebooted in a couple of years anyway. So why does any of this matter? So, so now, so that's another reason why I kind of go back and I just buy comics from like my youth up to my 20s, and I enjoy those much more because it's much more what I'm after as a reader. I feel like I had a big point here and I lost it. But, but you know, you get distance over time. But also at the same time, they shouldn't necessarily be writing the books for a dude in his 40s.
No,
you know?
No, they shouldn't. But I think there's a way to, because like I don't know if you agree with this, but like some of those DC books in the 80s were being written for guys in their 40s. And I still feel that way as a guy who's like 38, 39. Like when I read the original run of Suicide Squad, I think it's a great book. But when I was a kid, I was like lost. It's like I'm watching a very complicated movie that started 3 hours ago and I'm just jumping in the middle of it.
Right.
And I love it now. They were written, but I kind of like respected those books as a kid. Like I didn't like outright hate them. And I thought like, all right, well, this is still an intelligent book being put out, even though like it's kind of like above my head and I'm going to go back to X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff. But now I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like the books are, I'll tell you who I think kind of ruined comic books. And I do like a lot of his stuff. I'll tell you why. Brian Michael Bendis. I don't know if you agree with me on that or not.
I've read very little of Bendis' stuff, and I found that his stuff generally isn't to my taste. So I don't really seek his stuff out.
Okay, and I'll tell you why I think he ruined it is because I'll never forget I got the first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, which is his main big breakthrough. And I'm liking it. And 10 seconds later, it was over. And I'm like, I spent $3 on that. And I kept buying the book. And by the time I got to issue 5, I'm like, this guy wrote 2 pages of story in 5 issues. And I've spent
the decompressed storyline.
The decompressed stories, which he kind of like created. And I think a lot of books do. And I mean, he's the king of it. I mean, you can read some of his books in 12 seconds. And then I think it was what summer was it? I think it was 2012. They did Avengers versus X-Men while the Avengers movie's out. And I was still kind of collecting some Marvel books, and I got an issue of Avengers, and it's all about Iron Fist in Kunla learning about the Phoenix. And I'm like, okay, if I'm a kid, because when I went to go see the Batman movie, when I got out, my dad took me to the newsstand. I bought a bunch of Batman comics. And some of them got over my head, or like Batman wasn't in it that much, but it was enough Batman to be like, I have a Batman comic. But if I'm a kid and I leave the Avengers movie and I'm like, oh my God, I want more Avengers books. And I run to the store and my dad spends, give me the new Avengers. And my dad spends like $4 at the time for the new Avengers book. And I grab it. And at the time, nobody knew who this fucking character was. And it's some fucking guy named Iron Fist in the Himalayas talking to an Asian guy for 22 pages. If I'm the dad, I'm the kid. I'm like, what is this? Like, this isn't anybody I saw in this movie. This isn't even like Spider-Man or Wolverine or anyone. This is just like some guy. Yeah. And he would do that a lot with Avengers. And my thing was like, you know, I think he kind of like, why am I spending $4 on an Avengers book with no Avengers? Or that doesn't really relate to the Avengers at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is something to be said when like you have a major movie coming out or something like that. It's not the worst thing in the world to have the book resemble the movie somewhat, or vice versa.
Or at least have, like, you know, you can have a team of Avengers where it's Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Ghost Rider, Hellcat, I'm just throwing names out here, Wonder Man, and I don't know, Prime from the Ultraverse. But as long as you have some of the characters from the movie, I think new kids who pick up the book, like, well, who's that? And maybe they might go down a rabbit hole of looking up who Hellcat is or who Ghost Rider is, or
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, I remember as a kid when I was reading comics, and this was when you still had like the editorial footnotes where it'd be like, oh, remember the last time that Batman fought the Riddler, and there'd be a little
yeah,
asterisk, and you follow that down to the bottom of the panel, and it would say like, he last fought the Riddler in Batman number 265,
yeah,
and I found that so intriguing and inviting because there was this whole world that I got to learn about.
and you could follow by the numbers.
Right,
Yeah,
right. And somehow along the way that became, oh, you have to read these 20 books before you can understand this one story.
yeah,
And that's the sort of thing that I think pushes new readers away. It doesn't
yeah,
excite them. It's, when it becomes almost like homework you have to do. And at that point you kind of throw up your hands and just be like, okay, no, I just want to read a story with Batman.
yeah. I mean, I remember my friend opened up a comic book store in 2014. And the summer of 2015, he stopped selling comics. He just went completely to Magic cards and
Mhm.
Warhammer figurines. He said, I ordered all this Secret War shit, and nobody bought it. And I read it, and none of it really had anything to do with Hickman's story in the main Secret Wars book.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, there's just all this mess that is, and I think people kind of caught on to it, but they're still doing it.
right,
I
right.
mean, I know I looked the other day at the checklist for War of the Realms, which was last summer, and I'm like, who has the money to invest in this? This is like an investment. This is like a business investment.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It really,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I remember like in when it gets to the point where you have to follow like 4 or 5 books just to follow the one character,
Hmm.
um, that appeals to the really hardcore fans, but I think you lose a lot of the casual readers.
Especially with the price now, because when it was
Yeah,
$1, if when they did like an X-Men crossover, like Executioner song or something, all right, I don't really usually buy X Factor. I got to buy it the next 3 months.
mhm,
It's only an extra $3, and it's going to be a fun $3 because
right.
this storyline seems so cool. So nobody mind. But when it's like, oh my God, I have to spend now an extra $50 this month because the Avenger book that I
Right.
collect
Yeah.
is in the War of the Realms. It's like, well, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started reading, the books were 50, 60 cents. So
Yeah.
if it crosses over into like 1 or 2 books, you can probably scrape that together.
Hmm.
But yeah, when it's $3.99 a book or whatever the cover price is for an individual issue now, it becomes a major expense.
Well, I'll never forget the summer of 2016. A comic had on him the first issue of Civil War II at Monday Night Goots. So I grabbed it, and I think I read it while the host was doing their. I mean, while the host, no, somebody. I think it was a new talent person doing a 5-minute set. I read
Uh-huh.
it before that person got off stage,
Oh, that's sad.
and it was Brian Michael Bendis, and I said, "Don't you feel ripped off that you spent $6 on this?" He goes, "Yeah, I need to stop buying these."
Right, right.
And I think like his way of writing, it got people to, hey, you know what? This little story now we'll get 6 issues out of it instead of 2. But I think after a while, people are like, I can't spend $30, $40 on a story that 20 years ago, or would have cost me $5, $10 at
Hmm.
best.
Hmm.
You know?
And you're not even in an individual issue, you're not even necessarily getting a complete story. You're not getting a beginning, middle, and end. You're getting a setup for the next 20 issues or something.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of turned a lot of people off to comics.
Yeah.
I also feel like right now a lot of comic book writers are kind of writing towards a younger audience. Especially Marvel, they have a lot of books that cater towards like girls,
Hmm.
like teen girls, more so than ever before. And even DC, they just relaunched Amistad, and it's very. I mean, what do you call the Princess of Gemworld? I used to like her.
Amethyst.
Yeah, I don't know how that. That's another character where I don't know how you don't make a fucking movie out of that. I mean, like, oh my god,
Yeah,
that's
she's
so
clearly
Disney.
made to appeal to young girls, and she has been since the beginning, since she was introduced in the '80s.
Yeah, the '80s book was great.
Yeah.
But that book is very. But here's the problem. I think is that you kind of outprice that audience. Um, you can't really charge $4 or $5 for Amistad because,
Mhm.
like, if you're a 14-year-old girl, you don't have a job, you just want to be parents.
Right. Yeah.
Your parents are gonna
You're probably
say,
still getting an allowance or whatever.
yeah, like, oh, I this appeals to me, and they're like, well, that this appeals to me and that appeals to me, and Squirrel Girl appeals to me. I'm like, all right, that's $30 right there, honey. Why
Yeah.
don't I just get you Netflix for $7
Right.
and you can watch it on the bus to school. You can watch it.
Or we get this video game featuring the same character, and you can play that over. You can be the character in that.
Yeah. Or this mobile game that's free, although they don't know the kid's gonna fuck them with the transactions.
Right.
And I just feel like they're outpricing that audience. And the people that can afford those books, like, are guys like me and you, 30 in their mid 30s,
Mhm.
late 40s, that have disposable income, but aren't interested in an Amistad written for a 14-year-old girl who may not believe in gender conformity anymore. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where the disconnect is. You have to be affordable to that audience because kids don't have five kids don't have $80 a month to blow.
Right. Right. And you don't really necessarily have comics as an impulse buy anymore.
That you don't. You have to make a commitment to go into a store and buy them.
Yeah, you have to like consciously seek them out. You don't necessarily see them at the supermarket checkout or at the bookstore, like just an individual issue. You might see a little of that, but I don't even know if they make the Archie digests anymore.
They
Like,
they do. They do.
okay.
Although that's another. I started watching. Have you ever tried to watch Riverdale?
No, I mean, what I found out about Riverdale, I was just like, I don't think this is anything that
It
would appeal to me.
it I watched like last Saturday. I watched like 6 episodes in a row because I was just like mortified at what they did. Did you like Archie as a kid?
Sure. I mean, like any kid, I read some Archie. I mean, but as an adult, no, I'm not terribly interested in who Jughead is fucking.
Okay.
You
Well,
know?
here's the big problem with that show is that they've made every character into a massive asshole, kind of
Right.
like what they did with Titans. But here's the problem: Reggie is not a main character. He's barely on the show. If somebody said we have to make a dark version of Archie, I would be like, okay, the
Mhm.
main character is Reggie because that's the only character you're not betraying by making him
Right.
into a merciless asshole.
Right. And he's the character who stirs up the conflict. Uh,
Yeah, he's the. They kind of gave Reggie's character traits to Archie and Jughead,
yeah.
which
So
to me is
I
like,
guess he became redundant then from a
yeah.
storytelling point of view.
But I was just like, well, why isn't Reggie? Reggie should be the J.R. Ewing of this fucking thing. I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. That's. Do you remember they did a Archie TV movie in this was
Yes,
around 1990? It was like
I rushed home. We were out for dinner. I made my parents rush home to see it. Yeah.
and Lauren Holly, a very young Lauren Holly, played Betty. And
Yes.
it was all the Archie characters that came back to Riverdale for their class reunion, and they were trying to do like the big chill with Archie.
Hmm.
And oh, it's and at one point Jughead sings a rap version of Sugar Sugar.
Yes, I saw that on the. I saw that on YouTube the other day because I looked it up to see if you could buy the DVD because I kind of wanted it for my
It's
collection.
you probably get it like as a made to order thing or something like.
No, 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 nowhere. But you can.
Really?
You only on VHS. It was never released on DVD. I guess you can get it at the Comic Cons at the bootleg
Right.
if they ever have Comic Cons again. Um, but you can
Very relevant.
watch it on YouTube. The whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's
It's so funny because they do a rap version of Sugar Sugar and it looks really bad now. The first episode of
right.
Riverdale, they have Josie and the Pussycats do like an Ariana Grande version of Sugar Sugar. I was like, they're gonna keep just rooting this song every like 30 years.
But I'm old enough that I remember a time where a comic book being adapted into like a live action thing that was
It
such
was a
a
big deal.
rare thing. I felt obligated to watch.
Yes, that's how I was. When that came out, they had ads in the Archie comics, and they acted. I mean, they acted like you would react if you're like, if they cast you in a Marvel movie, that would
Right,
be the reaction that Archie comics had. Like, we got a movie made about us, and like,
right,
it's
right.
Sunday.
You're validated suddenly.
Yeah, and I had to rush home to see it because it's like if I don't watch this, I guess Archie comics are gonna have to kill themselves or something.
Right. I mean, I remember I watched. There was a crappy TV movie that they adapted the Generation X comic.
Yes, I rushed home for that.
And I
I
watched.
got my
I've never
homework
read the
done.
Generation X comic in my life, but I
Hmm.
felt obligated to watch that
Yeah.
because I wanted to support
The
more.
only it's funny, the one thing I was like, nope, was Steel. I was like, yeah, no, not.
I've never seen all the Steel movie. I've never seen all of. I've never seen any of the Fantastic Four movies all the way through.
Well,
Bits and
that
pieces of them, but
I've seen them, and people shit on '94 and 2005, but I gotta tell you, nothing is worse than 2015. 2015
that one looked really bad.
is offensive. See, because at least 2005 and 94, they try. They're trying. They don't
Yeah,
hit it, but they're trying. They're like,
exactly.
this movie had nothing but disdain for the Fantastic Four. They're like, this is
Yeah.
stupid. I don't even know why we're making a movie about this.
See, I mean, that's when I'm like, okay, if you're gonna take these established characters and you're gonna turn them into something that's that far from what they've been for like
Hmm.
50 years at this point,
Yeah.
why are you even doing that? Why not just do so, yes, do something different with them, but keep it in the established ballpark.
Yeah, like Disney did with The Incredibles, which is basically like the greatest Fantastic Four movie ever made.
Exactly,
Not
exactly.
about the Fantastic Four.
Right.
That was a great movie. You brought up something. We brought up Archie and Riverdale, but I wanted to Amistad, the comic. I had another thing I wanted to bring up to you about comic books.
Now, Amistad was the thing about the slave ship. That's kind of
Oh,
different.
wait, sorry. Well, that's her brother, Amistad, actually. He actually goes back in time and creates the ship. It's a whole
Wow,
friggin'
wow.
reveal
That
that
there's a
Amistad is
crossover
Amistad.
for
Well,
you.
how do you say what? How do you say it
Amethyst,
fucking?
like the stone.
Amethyst. Okay. Her brother's Amistad. Okay, now we're gonna reveal that in a future issue. It's gonna
There
be
you go. There you go.
the
There's a magic for you.
the Gamergate people are gonna be very upset, but it's fine.
Well, good.
Yeah.
They deserve to be.
They're gonna be very upset that she has a black brother that created Amistad. Shit,
But
I
they
want
won't like her anyway to begin with because she's a girl. So
yeah. Yeah. Shoot, I wanted to ask you something and I can't remember off the top of my head. Do you see like, and I could see this. Do you see them shutting down the comic book division, Disney and AT&T? I used to always be like, "There's no way in hell," but these corporations and the way things are going with Corona
yeah.
and the way they look at the bottom line. I mean, and AT&T is a bottom line company. They are not like,
Hmm.
you guys don't forget the history of the Blackhawks. They're like, huh?
Yeah. I mean, maybe they might at one point. I mean, I've heard the idea floated in the past where it's like, well, why do we bother doing news stories when we can just have all this inventory of stuff we can reprint?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I don't know. I can see a corporate type person thinking that's a really good idea. I don't know how practical that might be to do that, or to just stop publishing the comics altogether and just let these IPs exist as
Mm-hmm.
images on backpacks or T-shirts or whatever.
I could see DC doing that before Marvel, especially with the
Mhm.
Dan Dito. I could see Disney kind of being like, let's keep some of the comics going, because then they're basically like brainstorming. They're basically like
Right.
a small profitable brainstorming session where
Yeah, it's like free R&D for them almost. I
yeah,
mean, or it's a very low overhead R&D.
be,
I think Disney is smart enough to know that it makes sense to always be developing your properties.
yeah. I think Eternals is the long shot. I think the reason why they picked Eternals is like if it bombs, they can be like, it was fucking Eternals. Like, what do you think? What did you expect? But if it goes through the roof, if it's another like,
Yeah,
if it breaks box office records, then they know like we can do anything as long as we have Marvel next to it. Because I got to be honest, I have never even I never even read Eternals. The only one I know is Cersei because she was on the Avengers, and the guy Ikarak or something. He has the red.
the Karis. Yeah.
Ikaris, yes. But Cersei I know very well because she was on Avengers when I was a kid when they were doing when Black Knight was the leader of the team. I'm excited
Mhm.
about Black Knight in the book.
They're all wearing the leather jackets
Yes, they're all wearing leather jackets, which I would buy one of those leather jackets. I'll have you know.
with the Avengers A on the. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
that would look sharp. That would look. I wasn't too fond of the Avengers wearing the leather jackets, but there was this weird thing in the '90s where I guess because of Animal Man got this started, where every superhero had to have a leather jacket.
yeah. Well, Rogue was the best character with a leather jacket. I think she
Oh
should
yeah,
always.
yeah. Well, it makes sense for her
Yeah.
because yeah, I mean, if she can't touch anybody, it makes sense for her to cover herself up as much as possible and have a hooded thing. And that always gave her a distinctive look. I always liked that.
Oh, this is what I wanted to ask you. I know. Do you think we're gonna have a Comic Con this year, New York or San Diego or otherwise, or
Uh,
in 2020?
I know San Diego hasn't officially given any word, but they're not until July. So if I
Mm-hmm.
was in their shoes, I would be waiting and seeing. I know that several cons that I was planning to go to have either canceled or at the very least delayed. Um, like the big con that I participate in is the East Coast Comic Con, which happens at the New Jersey Meadowlands. That was
Okay.
set for May, about a month from now, and they sadly had to cancel.
Mm.
Um, like at first they pushed it to like August, but then a week or two later they canceled it. And and I understand why they made that decision. It sucks, but you got to do what you got to do.
Mm.
And it's so weird to me to see that like the Jacob Javits Center and the Meadowlands Convention Center, they are both hospitalizing corona patients right now.
Yeah. No, I know, that's wild.
And I see that on the news, and I just think I've had so many happy memories at both of those places,
Mm-hmm.
at cons. I don't know. I mean, like the New York con, that's not going to roll around until like October. So who knows where we're going to be in October?
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if San Diego canceled, but I have no special insight into that.
I mean, I personally think they will both be canceled, or they're
Mhm.
going to move New York to February, which is what I would do. I would move New York. They used to be in February
Right.
anyway. I would move it to February.
Yeah.
Here's why: they overcrowd that like a motherfucker. I mean, you've been
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
I never feel claustrophobic or I need to get away from people. I could be on the subway for 97 stops and I'd be fine if I'm smushed between people. But at some points in New York Comic Con, I'm like, I need to get away from everybody.
Yeah.
And sadly enough, the only place that's really like open air on the floor is the back issue section. But that's besides the point. But um, I'm not going to go if it's in October. I'm not going to go. I do have a good time there, but anything I could possibly want, I'll just order online.
Yeah.
It's not worth it to me, especially if this country is still like having problems health wise. I don't trust Reed Pop to make it a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not a safe environment there as it is. I think it's way too crowded. This year was better than the year before, but I think it's way too crowded.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel the need for it. But you know what? I think they should move it back to February and have it in February in 2021, and then see what they should do for 2022.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, because I'm sure that all sorts of events that were scheduled for the Javits Center have been shifted. So who knows if there is even an open weekend in February at this point?
Now there's this, because you talk to more. I don't talk to any comic professionals. The only person I ever, I think he's the guy who drew Justice League. I got him in once at Caroline's. He
Kevin
drew it with
McGuire?
Grant Morrison. Wrote it.
Like,
Howard Porter.
Porter, Howard Porter.
Yeah, I
Yes.
got him in to see Chris Hardwick, and I remember him being shocked. Mike Lawrence knew who he was, and I
Uh-huh.
got him. I
Oh
snuck
yeah,
him in.
Mike's a big geek.
Yeah, and he was so like shocked that I knew who he was. So
Yeah.
he was like, "Oh my god, you know who I am?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Like, I mean, a comic book professional fame is like the lowest level of fame, because
Yes.
you can go to a comic book convention and be huge and people are freaking out over you, and then you walk out of the con
Mm-hmm.
and no one knows who you are, or
Yeah.
no one cares who you are.
Is that, if they have no cons this year, is that going to severely affect most comic professionals' bottom line?
That's a good question. I don't necessarily think so, because I think most of them would still get the bulk of their income from doing the books themselves. Um, a lot of fans, they take convention appearances as like a given, or that's something that creators have to do. But
Mm-hmm.
no, you have to recognize it's a bonus. They are not required or usually contracted to appear at a con.
Yeah.
If they are asked at the con, their schedule is free enough, and the offer is right, they'll make an appearance. Because I mean, most people do like coming out and meeting fans and stuff like that. And doing comics is a very solitary profession.
Yeah.
You're inside writing or drawing all day, so it is fun to go out and be social for a weekend. So yeah, I don't. No, I don't. I don't
You
know
don't
if
think it'll hurt them? Like, because I
I
know
don't.
like some
I don't
artists
think
sell
most people would
commissions
take a
there
big
and
hit.
stuff.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Some artists sell commissions there or sell prints.
Yeah, I mean, with artists, I think definitely make more money, because yeah, they can sell commissions or prints or whatever. Um, you know, a writer can't really do that. You know, they can't like type up a script for you.
Yeah, they just have to sit there and shake your hand. Yeah.
They sit there, they shake hands, they'll sign old comics, they might charge. I mean, a lot of people they'll charge, and the money goes to organizations like the Heroes Initiative that takes care of older comic creators, because very many comic creators haven't had insurance or.
I know that they have been so fucked for so long. You ever hear the
Yeah.
story about Doom Patrol? Did you ever hear that story?
What, when they killed off the Doom Patrol, you mean, or?
No, the story about the creator in the Doom Patrol movie a few years ago.
Refresh my memory on this. I might have heard this, but late on me.
So, who created? Do you know off the top of your head the guy who created Doom Patrol?
Arnold Drake was the writer.
Okay, so they had a Doom Patrol movie in development at some point with New Line Cinema, and I think it was getting fast tracked.
Uh-huh.
And he saw that in the trades, and he went to DC Comics, and he said to them, "Hey, I noticed that you're fast tracking a Doom Patrol movie or something. Just so you know, he had some type of clause or something where he got like an extra percentage, or he would get." And he leaves, and they just canceled the movie because they didn't want to give him the money. And I think he's dead now. Am I wrong about that?
I just looked it up. Arnold Drake, he passed away in March of 2007.
Okay, yeah, and now obviously it's a Doom Patrol TV show. When after he went. Yeah,
I haven't heard that story before.
I heard that. I don't know. Some comic book creator shared that story, or he shared that story at a con.
Yeah.
And they just, because I think New Line was going to do one in the 90s. I think it was mainly based off Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
But still,
yeah,
Robot Man and Mr. Negative are going to be in it. And I think he went to point out, like, or maybe it was it was some type of merchandise with Doom Patrol. And he was like, hey, I get X amount. Just don't forget,
Right.
Well, we just won't make it then.
Well, I know, like I've interviewed Tony Isabella, who created the Black Lightning character for DC.
Yeah, what does he think about that TV show? I've never seen it yet, but
I watched a little bit of it, and then I kind of got my fill of all the CW shows.
Yeah.
But Tony Isabella, when he created this character, and he had a deal with DC that he got like a little piece of the merchandising, or if Black Lightning was used on a television show or whatever, he would get a little piece of that. He would get like a percentage of DC's percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to pass that the Super Friends wanted to use Black Lightning on the show. And DC, I'm probably going to mix this up. Basically, like Hanna-Barbera would have had to pay a higher licensing fee to use the character because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And Hanna-Barbera didn't want to do that.
So they put in Black Vulcan.
They put in Black Vulcan, who is basically Black Lightning in all but name, and costume, and so they really were just kind of screwing Tony out of money that would have been rightfully due his, and sadly the comics industry is filled with stories like that, because there are so many people who are just doing this for the love of it.
Yeah. And
they didn't really have people looking after their interests. I mean, if you want to hear a sad story, like Google Bill Finger, the man who.
Oh, that story makes me so mad. Like when you really look into it, I stopped looking into Bob Kane and Bill Finger after a while, because I'm like, this is just making me angry.
It will depress you and it will enrage you. Yeah, because I mean, Bob Kane, he came up with the initial idea of Batman, but all the stuff that really made Batman work came from Bill Finger, who was this writer that he knew. But Bill Finger didn't have a piece of the character, and he never got credit within his lifetime.
Yeah.
But he came up.
Bob Kane was a massive asshole.
Yeah, I mean, sad but true. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I love Batman more than anything, but he was co-created by a massive asshole.
Yeah. Didn't he used to pay art? So he would just write his name, Bob Kane, but it would be artists and writers that he would just pay to he had a little stable.
I mean, that was a practice called ghosting, and it was a very common practice in the cartooning world. And it still goes on in comic strips today. Like Jim Davis doesn't really draw Garfield. He has
I knew that. Yeah.
He has teams of people who write and draw with Garfield.
But I think he's kind of open about that, because I think I even knew that as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, that's been an open secret for forever. But it was a very commonly accepted practice in the 30s and 40s when Batman came about. But Bob Kane, he basically kept up the lie for far longer than it was feasible.
Yeah.
In the 60s, he would be like, oh, yes, I still draw every Batman story, when it was obviously different artist style.
Yeah, I mean, that's when they start putting the names. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, Carmine Infantino drew this Batman story. Irv Novick drew this Batman story. They don't look anything alike.
It's so funny because I never saw what that guy looked like until the Batmania of '89, and then they started. He did all this. He did talk show circuit.
What Bob Kane looked like?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm watching him, even like at 8, I was like, this guy created Batman? Like, he doesn't seem like he would come up with Batman, like.
He was very young guy. He was like 18 or 19.
Mm-hmm.
And like, supposedly, I think that's how he got such a favorable deal. Was he either was, or they said he was underage when he signed the contract with the entity that became DC Comics. And so his father, who I believe his father was a lawyer, and was able to negotiate a much more favorable deal for him later on.
Have you ever read the early issues of Action and Detective Comics, by the way?
Sure. Yeah.
Have you read? It's so funny because this reminds me of what's about to happen with Corona. How anti-Chinese those books were. I mean, they went out of their way.
Yeah. They got.
I don't know. Yeah, like
they got very racist. I mean,
they were very racist. The early Detective, and I finally got a chance to read them. And every other story, besides Superman, every other story was like, somehow the Chinese are assholes, and I was like, Jesus Christ! I didn't realize they had such a. Do you know why in the late 30s we all hated the Chinese that much? I mean, they kind of explain it in the book, but
I mean,
why DC Comics hated them that much?
I don't know if it was specifically DC. I think it was just more the culture in general.
Yeah,
I think there was like a lot of ignorance, and there was a lot of.
Because there's early issues of Superman where he's standing up for black people, and there's other stories in there where they're standing up for black people, but they're like, but the Chinese can go fuck themselves. All right, guys, let me just make it very clear.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really ramped up in World War II, of course.
Well, that was Japanese. Then they started praising the Chinese.
Japan, yeah, but again, we didn't really differentiate between various Asian countries.
No, there's actually a weird, I think it was Mr. America in Action Comics, where there's a story there where he goes, now the Japanese, this is like right before World War II, the Japanese are hardworking people. They're smart. But the Chinese, they can suck my asshole. Jesus.
And the way they would draw them, they would look literally inhuman. They'd give them these huge buck teeth. They'd color them with actual yellow, not like yellowish flesh tones, actual yellow skin. And I mean, they were just caricatured so extremely. And I mean, and you saw that with black people too. Mm-hmm. I mean,
especially in some of the early Disney comics. I also read those.
Yeah. I mean, even in what's still a very well-regarded comic, The Spirit, he had a sidekick character by the name of Ebony, who was a very stereotypically drawn black kid, and he had the huge lips and the big white eyes, and he talked in sort of like the Pigden English. I mean. And Will Eisner, the guy who created The Spirit, he expressed regret about that in his later years.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's nice.
Yeah. So I mean,
sometimes I feel like people just keep trying to defend their stupid decisions. Like. Yeah,
I mean, I think the only way I can get past that stuff is you have to look at it in the context of its time and just be like, oh, that was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, like sometimes I love Quentin Tarantino, but I'll go back and watch his movies, and I'm like, you don't need to say the N-word that many times. I get it. That's how people talk. Even nowadays in Astoria, people will say drop the N-word every 3 seconds, but not that many times. Like, maybe like 50 less N-words, and I think you'll be okay. It's not going to ruin the movie. And the fact that he still kind of defends it, I'm like, really, dude?
Yeah, that's getting into a whole sketchy area there.
No, I know, but you know what I'm saying? Like when people like defend their old mistakes, I'm like, you can admit that you don't have to say the word that much,
Yeah, exactly. And but there was so much racial stereotyping in those
early, except not so much the Superman books, which are the Superman stories.
No, because I mean, Superman, when he started out, he was like this real social crusader.
Yeah.
I mean, in the very first Superman story, he beats up a wife beater.
Mm-hmm.
He rescues a wrongly accused a woman from going into the electric chair, and
Yeah.
he intimidates a lobbyist who's like who's like a warmonger basically, and he's like flying him from building to building and just terrifying the poor guy.
Yeah, I the first 25 issues of Action Comics, I always thought would be really cool to make into a TV series, like a period TV series,
Oh yeah,
because you can really tell that they don't know what a superhero is. And by the time you get to issue 25 is
yeah.
when Luther first shows up,
Right.
and you're like, oh, now they have it figured out because they don't really understand. They're just angry, and they
Yeah.
don't really understand that they're like speaking to children and to
Mhm.
people who are downtrodden out there in the world. And I think they kind of get a handle of it. And he kind of shifts from being this angry, kind of gruff guy to Superman.
Right.
So I think they
Right.
realize, like, oh, this is like inspirational to people. We kind of got to pull back the anger a little bit.
Yeah, and also like you had things like the comics code coming in the 50s, so like the superheroes really had to clean up their acts then, you know,
Yeah.
and you couldn't have like in the early Batman stories where he brandishes a gun in a couple of them because they're
Oh,
really
yeah. I remember those. Yeah.
shadow pulps. Um, but
It's funny. I love Batman, but the early Superman stories hold up way better than the early Batman stories.
yeah, I mean, but you see some really interesting things in there because they're figuring it out as they go.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
figuring
both
out
characters. Yeah.
what works, what doesn't work, and like there's a Batman story in the 40s where he goes to fairyland and he fights a genie or something, and you're like, what?
Yeah. Oh, some of those World's Finest comics too are out there.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
would be actually a really good podcast, just reading Superman comics from the 50s, because that's when I'll never forget this comic book, because when I did read every issue of Action Comics,
Hmm.
where this is the whole story. Daily Planet gets a new time manager, and
Okay,
he
like an
cuts
efficiency expert.
a fishy expert, yes,
Okay,
because they're losing money or something, and he cuts lunch. He cuts lunch from an hour to a half hour, and
right.
everybody in the office is very upset. So Clark becomes Superman and flies him around and basically explains to him how it's very, very important that people have an hour for lunch. Like they need an hour to get things done. And the efficiency expert was like, "I'm so sorry, I'll make it an hour again." And then like they go back to having an hour lunch, and that's it. That's the story. And I'm like, somebody just was pissed. I guarantee you in DC Comics, they were like, you can only take a half hour lunch.
That's very likely.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I'm like, why? And also, wouldn't the efficiency expert be like, why does Superman care that I cut lunch hours at this stupid newspaper by a half hour?
Oh, that's great. I'm not familiar with that story, but I'll have to find
It's
that.
in the 50s, and I was like, when I read it, and my read through was like, they're completely they're completely out of ideas. They don't know what to write about at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it can be fascinating finding out the backstory behind what inspired some of these stories. Like um, when Jack Kirby came up with Galactus for the Fantastic Four to fight,
Mhm.
and Galactus is this character. He's this big cosmic guy who feeds on worlds, and he feeds off the energy of worlds, and then he leaves nothing left. And that was right around the time that um, DC Comics was being sold to the Kinney Corporation, or
Yeah.
Marvel was being sold to Cadence Industries, and
Mhm.
and the corporate world was coming in more, and that was kind of like Kirby's fear, that they would like suck out everything that was good and leave just this empty husk.
Mhm. And that's funny. That's my fear with AT&T with DC right now. Like
Right.
I feel like that everybody had that fear with Disney, but I feel like Disney kind of like they get what Marvel should and shouldn't be at this point. You
Yeah, yeah.
know?
I think they've handled the properties pretty well, and I mean, hell, what they've done with the movies alone, and
Hmm. Oh yeah, I
it
think the
boggles
characters
my
are fun.
mind that the man on the street knows what Wakanda is and knows what vibranium is.
Or and knows what Rocket Raccoon is. That's my thing.
Exactly, exactly. This is the stuff that got us beat up on the playgrounds when we were kids, and now,
Oh, I remember like I would go. There was a comic store called Strike Zone, and I would buy Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. Like I still was into those books, and they were bad. They were very bad. But I was like, no,
Mhm.
I gotta support. I had this weird. You gotta support some of these characters no matter what.
Right, right.
And I would go to the counter. Oh, you're buying Thor and Captain. Like there was a cute girl who would she just rip into me, and I'm like, I'm putting money into your store. Why are you ripping? I'm sorry, I bought Spawn last week. There's no Spawn this week. This
There
week.
There are so many comic shops where that's a common occurrence, where it's like, yeah, you're a customer, you're
Yeah.
giving them business, and they make fun of your purchase.
Yeah, they're like, and I remember like towards the end when Image stopped being cool, this other
Right,
store, the guy would make, oh, you're buying more, you're buying Youngblood again, you know.
right,
So I didn't
right.
buy the Authority, I was still buying like Youngblood, and I was like, yeah, like, what are you? It's still like, how much? It's $2 in your pocket. Like, what are you yelling at me for?
You don't go to a car dealer and they're like, "Oh, you're buying a Chrysler."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, there's no other business where you can get away with that.
I'll never forget I had a friend at the store, and they had like a big. This is how this. I used to spend a lot of money. My aunt would give me like $20 a week, and I would spend a lot of money. And my friend one day went in the store with me, and he was making fun of the figures, and he goes like, "Oh, what's that? What are they gonna make next Spider-Man on the toilet?" And he leaves. And I go back that Friday night when I got some money, and I'm like, "All right, I'm here to take the rest of my pull list." Like, oh, we put it back, and it was like comic books that nobody really bought, so they were like some dark horse shit.
Right.
And I'm like, "Why'd you put it back?" It was, "We don't like what your friend said." And I'm like 14 at the time, and I'm like, I'm spending a lot of money here. Like I never
Uh,
said that before in my life. Like, I'm putting a lot of money in the store. Yeah, whatever. And I'm like, what? And I went to this other store and I told the guy what happened, and I started pulling my list. So I went back there like 3 weeks later and I said, hey, just so you know. And they're like, yeah, and then the magic amount. We didn't realize how much money we were spending. We would love to have you get your comic books here. We were just messing
right.
with you. And I'm like, no, it's good. And they went out of business like a year later.
It sounds like they deserve to.
Yeah, because I'm like, even I never
Yeah.
did that. That's like an older person thing to do. Like, I put a lot of money, but I was like,
Right.
I am putting a lot of money into this store. Like,
I I remember there was a store that I went to here in New Jersey, and I won't say the name of the store because I
mm,
believe they're still in business.
mm,
But the final straw for me going to this store was I had missed. This is when I was still going to the store every single week.
yeah,
I'd missed 1 week, and so I was buying 2 weeks worth of books. So that for me at the time that was probably at least $40.
yeah,
And I bought up all these books, and there's a weekly newsletter thing, the Comic Shop News. I don't They still do that.
they
Yeah,
still did. I wish they did the comic book buyer's guide because that's where I knew who Tony
oh,
Isabella was and Mark Evier.
sure,
Um, let me tell you here. Let me real quick before you finish the story. I just want to tell
okay,
you. There's Mark Evier had a weekly weekly column in
yeah,
Comic Buyer's Guide. He
right.
did one about Sam Kinison and going to see the late night shows on Saturdays at the Hollywood Improv.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Find that article because that is the article that made me get into Sam Kinison and stand up comedy, and that's why
Oh,
we're here right
cool,
now.
cool. Yeah, yeah. Mark Evanier, he's terrific.
Oh,
He's
that's how you say his name. Okay, sorry.
yeah, Evanier.
But to finish your story, I'm sorry for
But so I was buying like 2 weeks worth of books, and he gave me like that week's comic shop news, and I said, oh, I need to get last week's too, because I missed that out. I didn't make it to the store last week, and then the store owner, who was the guy who was ringing me up, he starts bitching about how those cost him like 10 cents a piece because they're free to customers.
that. Yeah.
And he starts talking about how those cost him 10 cents a piece. And I was just like, dude, I'm spending 40, 50, maybe even as high as $60
A
right now.
week.
I don't want to hear about this. This is costing you 10 cents.
Yeah.
And I walked out and I said to my friend who I was with, I was like, I'm never going in that store again. And,
And
and
are they under? Or are they still going?
he did not appreciate a regular customer who was getting him business. And he had to start bitching about how those cost him 10 cents a piece. And I was like, well,
And
don't get
we more that but like every now and then I'll be like, oh, I wish the comic stores were back when I was a kid because there were a ton in the '90s in my
yeah.
neighborhood Astoria.
Yeah.
But then you look at like how they would treat people sometimes and the weird things they would say. It's
Mhm.
like, well, no wonder you're not in business anymore.
I mean, too many people, they run it as an extension of their hobby
Mm-hmm.
instead of as a business.
Yeah.
I mean, like a more rational world, they'd be like, oh, well, what's really hot? Oh, Spider-Man's really hot right now. Let's order more of the Spider-Man
Mm-hmm.
and give the people what they want. Oh, you're
Yeah.
you're buying this book that I personally think is crappy, but it's really popular. Yes, please buy this book.
Or there would be one of the last stores I went to. There would be a guy by the counter who would just shit on you if you were buying stuff that's like popular.
Right.
Like he would just, and it's like, why would you not tell that guy keep your mouth shut? Because
Yeah.
that place, you know, a lot of great stores I went to went out of business, and I'm like, I really feel that they cultivated an atmosphere for new people that wasn't inviting, and so they kind of
Right.
lost all the new customers.
I mean, it's so amazing. I see this with so many comics fans, and like a lot of comics fans, they're marginalized, they're picked on people, and they
But
get a
now that's
little
kind
bit
of
of
gone.
power, and then they become the bullies.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but like now, like I almost feel like you can't really be like, oh, I'm marginalized. If girls are sitting around in their apartment watching Endgame or watching
Oh
Jessica
no,
Jones,
no, yeah, we have won. We have
we
won.
won. I mean, there's women obsessed with Oliver and Felicity, which I think is the worst couple in TV history, but that's besides the point. But they're like women obsessed with Oliver Queen now. You can't be like,
Yeah, yeah,
nobody gets me.
and that's a thing I don't get about like the certain segment of comics fans, like the Comicsgate people, is where
Mm.
they're just like, oh well, they're catering to women and blah 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 and blah blah. And I'm like, dude, when I was a kid, I would have killed for girls to be into comics.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
this is what
remember
I
like,
wanted as a kid. I wanted girls to appreciate my geeky shit.
yeah, if the hot chick in my high school was into Iron Man and into going to Comic Con, oh my god, that would have been an in for me. I would have had so much to talk to her about
I
instead of the
know.
you have to you had to almost be like, oh yeah, it's my comics, and then you have to put them to the side and talk to
Right,
her about
right. Or
nonsense.
yeah, I mean, you play it way down. You don't talk about that with the normies, you know?
Yeah, and now it's like it doesn't even matter. And I mean, it's just so bizarre to me. Then that's my thing. I feel like we kind of reached a turning point with the comic book industry and the comic book store. I don't. There's not a lot of stores that are like that anymore. Like you go to Midtown and
Yeah.
they're not judging you, or they are very
No,
professional.
no. It's been a long time since I've been to Midtown, but yeah, they're very professionally run store.
Yeah, and most stores now, I think because they know now, like shit, we need this guy to spend money.
Mhm.
But I think now you reach a turning point where like a lot of these stores chase people away in the old days, and now like they're kind of looking for their diehards, and now there's Corona, and now you might be talking about whether we like it or not, the death of physical media and
Mhm.
the death of print media. Because it's like, look, not only is it not feasible for me to go to a comic store and buy a book, it might be dangerous
Yeah,
because of
but
Corona.
I mean, there are still things you can do to support your local comic stores
Yeah,
if you are in a financial situation where you're able to. And I realize like money's tight for a lot of people. I'm one of those people right now. But you can like put down money for your poll list. You can buy a gift card. You can
yeah.
like something to let them know and to put your money where your mouth is and show them that you are going to be there as a loyal customer when this whole thing is over.
Unless you're like me, you gave up on them 10 years ago, but that's besides the point.
Yeah,
But
well,
but yeah, no, no, no. What I do is actually right before this went down, they opened up There's a new Royal Collectibles by me, and I
Mhm.
go there every now and then, and I'll buy because I buy I buy figures now. When I
Well, the Funko Pops.
Yeah, what happened was I gave up toys really
Mhm.
early, like 11, 12, and I had this guy give me all these wrestling figures when I worked at Caroline's, and when I quit managing there in 2015, I went and stayed up full time. I'm like, how am I going to make money? I started selling the wrestling figures.
Mhm.
I was making a ton of money. And my dad was like, you should have kept collecting toys. Why did you stop? I'm like, yeah, that's what I should have collected because nobody's buying fucking comics.
Right, right.
And I
Like
still,
the
if
like
I
the end of the 40-year-old virgin where he's selling off his whole collection.
Yeah, but you know what? The toys are actually, you can get money off that. So every now and then, I'm kind of like a gambler with it. Like that, I don't play poker and I don't go to casinos. But like,
Right.
if I see if I go to the comic store and I see a Thor figure, like I got the 75, the 80th, what's the anniversary? 80th anniversary last year of Marvel.
Or Thor? Or oh yeah, Marvel Comics had their 80th anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah, they had an 80th anniversary Thor, and it's Thor how Jack Kirby drew him in the 60s.
Right.
So I grabbed that figure, and I'm like, I bet you maybe in a few years that'll be worth money. Or I grabbed
Mhm.
when I went to go see Aquaman opening night, they gave me a free Black Manta Funko Pop, so I'm holding
Mm.
on to that because you can only
Right.
get that going the Thursday the Aquaman premiere.
Oh sure.
So I do that. I collect toys now, but when I do buy toys, I'll go to the comic store and buy.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's good. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, if it's a good comic shop, they'll sell a variety of stuff. They'll probably have a few toys. They'll have some trade paperbacks that you can check out. You can read some of the stories that inspired
mhm.
the movies and the TV shows that you're into. There's a lot of cool stuff.
Do you think the comic industry is going to look drastically different in a year? I think so. I think in
Probably.
terms of like stories and the books being put out, this is whether they want to or not, it's going to have an effect on the
Yeah,
output.
yeah. Um, I mean, like comics, they'll always consciously or unconsciously reflect their times.
Hmm.
I mean, like you going back almost 20 years now, you can look at some of the comics, the superhero comics that came out after 9/11, and
Oh, that was a big thing for me because
you can
like
see the anxiety of that time like bleeding into the
oh,
character.
that's when they first had Captain America murder somebody. I don't know if you remember it. He murdered like an
Uh-huh.
Arab guy.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Remember that? Yeah, right after 9/11, Captain America. It was they kind of erased that, but there was a comic book where
Right.
he
Right.
tracks down a Muslim terrorist and kills him.
Yeah, and they did the Joe Straczynski wrote the Spider-Man issue where he deals with the Twin Towers
Yeah.
falling.
My only thing when they bring these real events into the universe
Hmm.
is that like if coronavirus came out in the Marvel universe right
Yeah.
now, where's Professor X? Where's Reed Richards? Where's Tony Stark? Like, how did
Yeah.
it get this bad that like Trump is like, like how come these guys haven't created a vaccine or
Well, I think that's why it's probably better to deal with this sort of thing like in a
down the road?
metaphor in an altered form. Because like
Yeah,
even in that 9/11 comic, the Spider-Man comic I just mentioned,
they had Doctor Doom crying over it.
they have Doctor Doom crying over it, and you see like the X-Men helping people dig out of the rubble. And this is a wonderfully well-intentioned comic, and I think even money from it went to a
Mhm.
9/11 charity. So I am 100% glad that they did this. But at the same time, I think like I look at it and I'm just like, none of these people are wearing face masks. Like the
Yeah.
Spider-Men are wearing face masks. None of the superheroes are.
Also, I don't know if you remember this, but there's an issue. I think one of the last issues of Tom McFarlane's Spider-Man, where
Mhm.
Juggernaut knocks down the Twin Towers and
All
laughs
right.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
it. And they get rebuilt 10 years later,
And
and
they did
plane
this
knocks
in
them
like
down. It's a big deal.
92 or 91, 92.
Yeah, it was like '92. Yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
crossover with X Force, and I remember in the comic book seeing that, and I was like, what did that like kind of like? I did this. I don't know if you saw this on Facebook, but a couple of years ago on Facebook, I counted everyone who died in Maximum Carnage,
Uh-huh.
and it was about he murdered about 100,000 people in New York City
Wow.
because they give you a number every now and then, and
Uh-huh.
and and they go like he kills everybody in the East Village. So I googled population of the East Village,
Oh my
and
God.
yeah, and it was just like, how did this city ever? He murders everyone that works on
Yeah.
like Madison Avenue. And so I googled people that work, and it was like, okay, so how did he surpass 9/11 like on like hour two of like his
Yeah.
page?
Yeah. And how did he not get the death penalty
How
after
did he not get the death? How is he still getting out? How did this not just like everyone in East
how
Village
nobody
got
just
murdered?
bet a Jack Ruby on him?
Yeah. And like the next issue was just a regular day in Manhattan. It was like, I guess, I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's one of those times when you probably shouldn't examine these things too closely.
No, no, but I like looked at like one murder scene.
Yeah,
I think he murdered everybody in like the garden. He like murdered everybody in a big building that I knew the capacity for.
like
And I was like,
Madison
wait a
Square
second.
Garden, or yeah,
Yeah, wait a second. That's more than 9/11 already off the bat. And then I started like counting, and I was like, oh my god. And how many? And it only like
yeah.
lasted like 3 days. And I was like,
I mean
oh.
that's why it's never a good idea to inject too much reality into superheroes, because then you
Yeah.
start asking all these questions that make the whole thing just collapse.
Yeah, which is what happened. Because in the next issue, Spider-Man's like fighting the leapfrog on Fifth
Right.
Avenue, and everyone's just fine. Hey, Spider-Man, get out of the
Yeah.
way. Hey, don't you remember Spider-Man stopped the guy who murdered 100,000 people in the city a day ago? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, John, this was a great talk.
This was
Where
fun.
can people find you on social media?
Well, let's see. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Trumbull Comic, Trumbull, and then the word comic. You can also follow my podcast, the SNL Nerds, and we have a Twitter account as well. SNL Nerds Show is the handle. And listen to me and Darren Patterson, and we have fun. We go on weird tangents like we've done tonight.
Yeah.
But we also talk about comedy a lot. So
yeah, well, this was a good talk. I like the fact, like not only we talked about the comic industry and COVID, but we also talked about like just our memories, and it's good to know like you kind of grew up in the same time frame that I did, but like
sure,
it's good to have somebody who like it's fun to talk to someone who has a lot of same experiences with comic books. Because sometimes I feel like
absolutely.
I'm not talking to people that have the same experiences that I had or
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun when you can bond over like the shared memories, or you grew up watching the same cartoons or whatever.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
110%. So thank you so much for listening, everybody. Tomorrow I'll be with Ashley Martins. We're going to be doing the Quarantine and Chill episode. We'll be reviewing One Tree Hill. So look forward to that. So thank you so much, guys. Have a great night. Thank you for listening.